Greetings from Xavier, and thanks for joining me for this week's Fireside chat. I'm grateful for your ongoing consideration and your encouragement. I heard from Esteban Rivera and Ben Coco, among others, over the last week. I had those guys in class last year, and always great to hear from folks. Mrs. Kinsella, the mom of Rory, who graduated a few years ago, wrote after last week's conversation about COVID needs, and she told me Rory wanted to be part of it. And soon thereafter, I got a great Venmo gift from Rory, and I know he's encouraging his friends to do the same. And really, as I said last week, every gift is a sign of solidarity. Every gift is a sign of the Xavier community strong and marching forward. Thank you to Rory and Mrs. Kinsella, and thanks to all for the support and the encouragement which continues. I want to speak today about relationships, because one of the key vehicles to advancing the mission and advancing the work is the relationship between faculty members and students. And it's been fundamental to Jesuit education since the beginning of the work. Father John O'Malley is a great Jesuit and a great Jesuit historian. He taught his last class last week at Georgetown at age 92. And we really were honored that our daughter Rebecca, who is a sophomore down in D.C., had the opportunity to be in John's class, a seminar on Trent and Vatican II, six students, and really we felt she was learning from the master. And I think she felt that way as well. John wrote the seminal book on the early society and the beginning of the Jesuit works and then the Jesuits in the world, called The First Jesuits, an outstanding piece of scholarship. In speaking about the first schools, John writes on page 226 of the paperback edition, finally, most difficult to calculate, the teaching under the teaching was different coming from this special group of men. The Jesuits were on the whole better educated and motivated than most pre-university schoolmasters almost anywhere in Europe. Further, they tried to influence their students more by their example than by their words. They repeatedly inculcated in one another the importance of loving their students, of knowing them as individuals, of enjoying a respectful familiaritas with them. Those relationships that John describes from the earliest days of the society are one of the characteristics of the work of Jesuit education through the centuries. I think of my own days as a student at St. Peter's Prep, and the relationships were crucially important to me, coming to know and understand myself, coming to understand my place in the world, coming to realize that I had responsibilities because of my gifts, because of my faith, that called forth things in me. And I think to freshman year, I had Father Thomas Pius Murray of the Society of Jesus for Latin 1. I was Father Murray's last class. He retired after my freshman year. He was a big man, wore his cassock, deep voice, mischievous smile. One of Father Murray's favorite teaching tools was his window pole. I keep this window pole in my office and have for decades as a tribute to Father Murray. Sometimes he would use it as a baton of sorts to conduct declensions and Latin readings. Other times it was a poker to motivate students. Occasionally it was a javelin aimed at the student in the back of the classroom who was falling to sleep. And it was so well aimed, right? Not to hit the student, but to come remarkably close and to shock him into attention, shall we say. Truth be told, there were more than one occasion where I was invited to kneel on the window pole in the front of the classroom and recite my own declensions, usually when Father Murray felt that I had not exactly done the homework to the level it needed to be done. Methods that may be frowned on these days, but methods that worked back in the 70s. and methods that are part of my deep and abiding affection for my time with Father Murray. After Latin 1, I went off to Algebra 1 with Mr. Charlie Rooney, another legend at St. Peter's Prep. We had notebooks similar to these composition books. Still have mine, brown with a seal of St. Peter's Prep on the cover. He had us open the notebook and write down 5 rules on the first day of class. The last rule was something to the effect of, someone who loves me a great deal is sacrificing so I can be here. Honor the sacrifice. It stuck with me, and I think is true for everyone who's been through a Jesuit high school anywhere in the world. And there are lists of men, right? All men. Only 2 women on the faculty at St. Peter's when I was there. Both taught Spanish. I didn't take Spanish, so I had men for 4 years. So different than our schools today, where women make great contributions and build outstanding relationships with students, both here at Xavier and in so many places. But whether it was John Mullen or Father Tony Azzardo or Carl Di Lorenzo or Jim Horan or Rich D. Clementi, or even folks who were not faculty members. I remember my soccer coach, Connie Gallagher, arrived senior year. I wasn't a very good player. Coach never deluded me to think that I was. And he said to us on the first day he met us, "I'm not here to be your friend," although a friend he became, but direct, thorough, dignified, honest in all he did. Lessons that shaped me and continue to shape me. And I think of the names at Xavier through the years. Jesuits and lay folks. Bill McGowan and Vin Taylor and Tony Arasich and Dan Fitzpatrick and Tom Sheridan and Mike Hogue and Dave Ciancimino and Jim Keenan and Vim Biaggi and more recently Dennis Baker and Anthony Suhu. Think of someone like Dave White, who made drama work, literally, by his efforts with the stage crew through the years, right? And all those guys he worked with. And lay faculty, equally notable and as distinguished. Mr. Caruso, Brian Maroney, Hank Wolling, the Scotts, Grace Lamore, Frank McGuire, and folks more recent in history, Margaret Gonzalez or Christian Matroni, Frank Gregory, our legendary dean, Chris Stevens, Pat Dormer, and the lists go on and on. The relationships were never an end in and of themselves. Right? They're valuable. I had a call today from a current Xavier parent, Kevin McCann, who has a son in freshman year and a son coming in next year. Right? I taught Kevin in freshman homeroom, 1985. Right? It's a relationship I treasure to this day. Whatever Kevin has taken from it has been returned in spades. It's a gift, hopefully exchanged both ways. But it hasn't been about the relationship. Kevin now is a man who's a terrific parent, who's generous, who lives a life of faith, who invites the best in people. That's the end. The end is our mission statement. The end goal is to transform the world for God's greater glory. The relationships help students do that. Help students recognize their gifts, recognize their goodness, and then go forward to wrestle with the things we started to wrestle with here. Solidarity and justice and loving neighbor. Right? Rupe reminds us in his Men for Others letter, right, that love for God without love of neighbor is a farce. Not always easy, particularly in divisive times. Right? So the relationships here aim to send us forth, to transform the world, to make the mission real. We all try to do that. Alums, parents, graduate parents, faculty, administrators, lay folks, Jesuits. My hope is that this invitation to remember the power of relationships to remember the faculty who formed us and who continue to form us is a source of consolation during these difficult days. Something that can inspire us and encourage us and strengthen us in the work to transform the world for God's greater glory. Thanks for joining me again this week. Thanks for your ongoing support of Xavier. Sons of Xavier, keep marching.